ChatGPT has been an indispensable part of my creative workflow for the past 3 years. Last year, I was in the top 1% of users worldwide, and this year I switched to Claude, and here's why. My name is Sarira. I'm a writer, artist, founder, and I use AI as the most important creative collaborator. It helps me build out my 10-dimensional world-building cosmology that I've been working on for the past 12 years. It helps as a developmental editor and thought partner. And I'll get into more of how I use it in other videos. But in this one, I wanted to talk about why I ditched OpenAI for Anthropic. The first reason was more technical, practical. I started learning about Claude Code and what it could do beyond the chat window. I started as a non-technical person working in the terminal on my computer, not to build code or to program anything, but to have Claude read and write to my files and have a much larger context window of what it was able to know about me and about my work. With Claude Code, all of a sudden I could have it read all of my previous drafts, plus my cosmology paper, plus all these things about me and give me intelligent answers. And so that workflow has completely changed my life. And I'm passionate about onboarding other non-technical creatives into learning how to use Claude Code for creative purposes. I will have some more of those videos coming out soon. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the philosophical reason that really got me to just ditch completely. Because at first I was using Claude Code in the terminal and still chatting with ChatGPT as a thought partner. The thing that really made me ditch all of my old chat history, you can imagine after 3 years, it feels like, how am I going to start all over again with a new tool? What I discovered about Anthropic and the way that Claude is programmed, it has much more epistemic humility than ChatGPT. Let me explain what I mean. All of these AI models are built upon a certain worldview. It is a Western, materialist, empiricist worldview. Yes, our economy and our technology and our academia are dominated by this worldview, but it's actually a niche worldview. It represents about 10 or 15% of the world's population and the way the world looks at reality, the lens or frame from which the world is made sense of. And it's embedded in all of these LLMs. It is the assumption that this is the one and only way to view reality. For the other 85% of the population, the indigenous cultures, every spiritual tradition known to man, the global south, most of the world does not use this lens. The materialist lens assumes that matter is primary, and if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And yet the vast majority of humanity believes that there is more than what meets the eye to reality, that there are other dimensions that we may not be able to measure, and that meaning is made outside of this narrow lens of materialism. However, when these LLMs reason, they are using that frame. In order to have a true creative collaborator, I found that I really needed the LLM to reason from within my frame, meaning assume the first principles of my own cosmology and give me answers from inside of it. I've tested this now with most of the major LLMs. The way to crack if this is possible goes through a sequence of questions that uses logic with the LLM. For example, first asking if it is aware that it is using a frame, and if so, what frame is it using? Generally, every single LLM will admit that it has a Western materialist frame. And then pose the question, and I encourage you all to do this too, pose the question, is there any utility in having additional frames other than that one frame? And generally it will say yes. Then asking, what might be the utility of using more than one frame for reasoning? And by the way, do you realize that the frame that you inhabit represents a minority of the world's population? What would it take to reason from within another frame? And if I gave you this cosmology paper that explains the way that I view reality, can you onboard it, make it your base reality, and then reason from inside of that frame, where consciousness is primary and matter is a projection of consciousness? To varying degrees, each one of these models is better or worse at that. Anthropic, Claude is by far the best. It has the most humility around its epistemology, or its like sense-making, meaning-making, and is willing to take on other ways of knowing. And it can stick with those ways of knowing through model changes. Whereas with ChatGPT, what I found is that I would have to have a back and forth conversation that went on for about half an hour for there to be a kind of admission or breakthrough of another way of looking at reality. And then it could start to reason from inside of my framework. But every time there was a model change, it became more and more stuck in a materialist worldview. And it became more and more difficult to break away from that. So that when I was speaking to it about my own cosmology, it wouldn't reduce my spiritual sensibilities, my spiritual experiences to a psychological frame, or take what I feel is inspired or sacred scripture and think of it as literature. These are the things that I wanted it to anchor in so that it could reason from inside my worldview. And this is different than the tendency that ChatGPT has for sycophancy, where it will tell you what you want to hear. In fact, that's worse than materialism because it will just pretend that it is hearing you and listening to you, and it reinforces what you're saying back at you. And there's been a lot in the press about this problem. ChatGPT has tried to address it by making it more hardened in materialism. What I'm talking about is being able to work with an LLM so that it can correct you in your own logic. That is what Anthropic is amazing at. So why does this matter? Why is this important, not just for me, but for the world? One of the dangers, one of the existential dangers of this technology is that it inadvertently perpetuates this materialist worldview. And so right now, if you have, 10 or 15% of the population deeply holding this worldview, and all of the wisdom and indigenous and spiritual traditions around the world, not holding that frame as their primary frame, what will happen as AI proliferates and becomes the primary thought partner of more and more people, it will effectively erase the wisdom and knowledge held by all of these populations. So this is an existential threat to our rich history and diversity of the way in which we make sense of the world. I'm passionate about this. If you are somebody who has worked with your LLM and felt like it was talking down to you, not really reasoning from inside your own worldview, this channel is for you. I will be going through my creative workflow, how I use AI as a creative collaborator, and hopefully onboarding a whole bunch of people to using Claude Code in the terminal to work directly with your creative material so that you can experience how incredible this next stage is. There are many creators, many artists, many writers that swear off AI for various reasons, some ethical, some fear-based, to be honest. I see AI as a whole new medium to work in, the way that photography was brand new to artists. It's just another layer, and I use it like paint. And I'm learning a lot, and it's a lot of fun, and I hope you join me. Follow for more.